Hey everyone, I'm Michael DiTullo. Welcome to my studio, and today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, coupes, and in specific, the lack of a coupe for the Polestar 2, which is a real shame. Alright, let's get into it. I'm of a certain age, you guys know that, and when I was growing up, in the 80s and 90s, there was just no shortage of coupes. Of course, in the US, we had muscle cars like the Camaro and the Mustang, but there was a whole host of other coupes, affordable. These were not like Ferraris, right? These are cars like a normal person could afford, like, I don't know, an Isuzu Impulse, right? You had the Subaru SVX, you had the Corrado from Volkswagen and the Scirocco before that, and even just pretty run-of-the-mill things like a Toyota Paseo. You had, of course, the Toyota MR2, especially the Generation 2. You had the Mitsubishi Eclipse. All these like really special cars. Of course, you had the Supra, the Nissan Z, cars like that. Of course, you had the iconic Porsche 911. But below that, you had other cars like the 924 and the 944 that were just kind of great-looking coupe cars. What other coupes am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch. I'm probably missing your favorite coupe. Shout out me down at the comments down below what you love a Pontiac Sunfire. I didn't mention it, apologies. But my point is, there was so many, it's hard to even remember. I mean, Audi Quattro Coupe, Audi 80. There's so many cool cars that were out there. Not even getting into the different Mercedes coupes that were available at the time. Largely, this category has just been replaced, especially in the United States. You really just don't see very many of these. There's probably, a dozen different coupe models on sale in the United States these days, largely replaced by the SUV, and I'm sure it's a low volume proposition to bring out a coupe in 2025, but I really think it's a shame that we kind of lost this product category for the most part. But there also was this whole other category of coupes that were basically two-door sedan cars. And it was like, okay, you needed something a little bit more practical than, let's say, a Supra or a 240 SX, something with a little bit more room in the back seat, but you still wanted a coupe, you still wanted a sleek car. So you could get the Honda Accord as a coupe, right? You could get a Camry as a coupe. You could get a Chevy Cavalier, right? You could get a Chevy Beretta. These pretty normal cars that there were sedan versions of, you could get as a coupe. And of course, probably most famous of these in my mind is probably thinking about the BMW 3 Series, that 90s 3 Series that was somewhat boxy. BMW nerds, hit me up with the model code, blanking on it at the moment. I know you're gonna shout at me in the comments. And there were some other cars along those veins. There was never a coupe version, but thinking of like the Audi A4 Cabrio, which was basically a two-door convertible of the sedan. And to me, I have a Polestar 2. I love that car, but this is the first time in my entire life that I haven't owned a coupe. And I really wish there was a coupe version of this vehicle. I feel like the format of it really feels like that kind of B4 era Audi A4 size car. And I just feel like a sleek two-door coupe version, essentially the same wheelbase, the same car, made a little bit less practical, but also a little bit more sleek. It just feels like it wants that. And I thought it'd be really fun to do a little bit of a design study. So let's jump into it. Let's see what I come up with. All right, first I'm going to start with a rear view photo of my car that I took. I think the rear view is probably the best view to focus on, as I think this will have the most dramatic change. I'm going to try to keep the wheelbase pretty much the same on this. I'll probably exaggerate the wheel size a little bit because I'm a designer and guilty, we just always do that. Next up, I'm going to define the roofline. This is really the biggest change to the whole car. I'm going to push the A-pillar back a little bit and rake it back a little, and then just encroach on the headroom just a touch in the rear. All right, I'm going to define where those doors go. I'm going to push the taillights down just a little bit. One of my big things about the Polestar 2 is I feel like the taillights ride the trunk lid a little bit too high, and then just put some little ground effects in the bottom and the rear that are just a little bit different, but also nod to the sedan. All right, now that I've got the design roughed out and overall set up, I'm I'm gonna put a clean layer over top and just do some neater line work. Starting with the wheels, gonna really kind of anchor the car with those wheels. Again, I exaggerated them just a little bit more. I couldn't help myself. And then putting some really nice side sculpting, again, kind of nodding to the sedan, but pulling it a little bit more forward. You can see I could push the A-pillar back enough to get that sculpting out into the front fender. Defining that roof line, getting a really nice arc to that side daylight opening, and then just changing the taillights up a little bit. I feel like nice to kind of evolve the taillight signature a little bit. The Polestar 3 taillights are so crisp and clean. I wanted to put a little bit of that influence in. I'm gonna keep the lower bumper pretty clean, pretty simple. Wheels, kind of a nice simple arrow wheel. And then let's define kind of the trunk lid, and of course get that famous, very subtle Polestar branding on there. A couple more details on the lower bumper, getting some reflectors and a license plate cut in, maybe a little bit of dynamic airflow on the bottom. And then we're off to the races, adding some shading. Really want to define the sculpture of this car. The Polestar, it looks like a block from a distance, but when you inspect the car at a close up, if you ever wash it, you actually notice all these surfaces are changing. They're always kind of pushing and pulling, catching the light, catching a little bit of sky up here, catching a little bit of the ground down below. And so I really want to articulate that very simply in this sketch. The Polestar 2 has a fair amount of plastic cladding, and I wanted to minimize that, just keeping it to the rockers and the lower bumper, not bringing it around the wheel arches. Again, as a way to differentiate it from the sedan, actually kind of nods a little bit to the BST edition, I think, nicely. All right, now we're defining those iconic Polestar taillights. They always have such architectural taillights, adding a little bit more shade to those undersurfaces, those plastic panels, make them pop. Gonna push the proportions a little bit of car designer exaggeration, some sketchy shading on the undersurfaces. Stepping back from it a little bit here, I'm gonna add some more highlights just to make it pop a little, and then push our shading a little just to give a little bit more depth to those shadows. Chasing my way around the car, adding a few more details here and there that give it that kind of classic Polestar signature, like those little side graphics. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. This is feeling like I would rock this. I would drive this car for sure. I love my Polestar 2 sedan, but I would love to have a coupe. All right, that's it, everybody. Let me know in the comments what you think. Should Polestar have made a two-door coupe version of the Polestar 2? I've read they have a new Polestar 2 in the works, so maybe they'll give us a coupe version of that. Should car makers go back to making coupes, or do people just want SUVs these days? Is this just a category people don't want? As always, you like this? Give me a like, hit subscribe, share it with a friend. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll talk to you next time.